Okay. All right. I'm going to stick to this microphone. So, over the past 2 months, for those of you who are new or haven't been to services in a bit, we have been studying the Jewish spiritual path of Musar. And we've been doing this in order to prepare ourselves for the reckoning that is coming this high holiday season. In just, I don't want to do the math time, we will be standing in front of the Torah. We will be standing in front of God with our hands on our hearts and our prayers in our mouth and our teshuvah, our repentance on our lips. And in order to get ready for that, we've been going through as many possible values as the rabbis could see fit to think are important. So if we can open up to the last page. Today, we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite, responsibility. So I'm going to read it to you. You do not have to read along. It's a little bit cumbersome, but we're going to discuss this. Cain's words, as in, Cain and Abel, Cain murdered Abel, and God said, where's your brother? And Cain said, am I my brother's keeper? So these words have come to symbolize people's unwillingness to accept responsibility for the welfare of others. The altar of Chelm identifies this tendency in all of us and urges us to recognize that, yes, we are our brother's keepers, and not just for our brother's sake. Bearing the burden of the other is action that cultivates the soul of the doer. The ego wants everything for me, cares only for me, and it is by learning and struggling to bear the burden of the other that one is enabled to overcome the insistent voice of the ego as the guiding source in life. Taking responsibility for others in their physical and emotional needs is nothing less than the method to free ourselves from the grip of ego that is always clamoring to be satisfied and yet never is. Doesn't this make you want to be really responsible for everyone? It sounds like such a drag. But I want to share with you the word for responsibility in Hebrew. It's achreut. And achreut, there's a machloket, there's a rabbinic argument about what the root is for the word achreut. So the three major letters are aleph, chet, and resh. So those letters can spell achar or acher. Now, those sound very similar, but they're actually different. Does anybody know what achar means? Achar means after. And acher means other. So we're going to play da-da-da-da-da-da. Let's be rabbis. So if you were a rabbi in the year 200 to 800, and you were trying to have an in-depth conversation about what responsibility is, and you had the word achreut to play with, would you go for the other meaning, or would you go for the after meaning? So after, I don't know, maybe consequences. They like to talk about, Olam Haba, what would happen in the next life. So, I'll give you a little hint. They're moving in those lines. And then acher, the other, maybe. So what do you guys think? You guys have any ideas? You want to lean towards achar or lean towards acher? I can always count on you to go first, Richard.
Well, of course, you can combine both of them.
Of course, but don't do that. Just, answer.
I would say, your concern for other people has consequences for you as well as for them. So first you have the other, and then you have what follows from that, which is what comes after.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so you could flip it, right? So you could say, if you're thinking about the consequences of your actions, and you're thinking about, if you believe in the world to come, what your experience in the world to come would be like, and you're thinking about those consequences, being responsible and helping and supporting the other would definitely be a means to that end.
But even in this life.
Oh, wait, they want to hear you at home.
But even in this life, because depending on how you treat other people, cultures and environment, it comes back to you now. So one doesn't have to imagine the afterworld in order to see the consequences. You can imagine the consequences of your actions towards other people in this life and quite soon, too.
Absolutely. So I like to talk about the difference between grown-ups and children. Just think about that for a second.
No, my feeling is that responsibility means either to yourself or to others.
Okay.
So akar, is it? Means responsibility to others.
Oh, okay.
Akar.
Means responsibility to others.
Yeah. And if you're an actor, you're not dealing with yourself, you're dealing with another person.
Wait, one more time. Give that to me again.
If you're an actor,
Okay, if you're the person doing the act?
yeah, if you're the person doing an actor doesn't really be responsible to himself, he's responsible to the script. So that's meaning to the other.
Okay. Thank you, Bernie. Anybody else? Other or after? Oh, Helen, I can always count on you.
So it seems to me that when you act for others, when you act to help others or to treat them with kindness, you gain so much more. So the after effect of giving is that you receive so much more.
Okay, great. So Helen's take on this after-other combination is that after you take responsibility for someone or serve somebody's needs, then you do get a feeling of satisfaction or connection. The quote that I read at the top talks about ego and how ego is related to responsibility. And I'm wondering if that seems like an obvious connection or if it seems like a bit of a stretch. Don, a resident therapist, how do you think ego might be related to responsibility?
Ego is ourselves, and what drives us is our ego. So certainly that's where responsibility lies and where other exists. But I know you didn't ask this just now, but I think it's more the other, or what was it one, other versus after. I think other stands out more for me. Yes, the other one has a meaning too, but being responsible is being aware of what you're doing and the consequences of that. Paying your bills, raising your family. Does that come anywhere close to your question?
Yes, thank you, Don. So one of the things that I think ego fights against responsibility for is actually getting the responsibility done. Because the ego fights, I don't know, the super ego? I don't know, I'm not a Freudian. But the ego fights that spiritual part of us who actually wants to take responsibility for others and be in connection to others. Susan.
Isn't it, we call it paying it forward if you do it before. So, that if you're helping other people, we call it paying it forward because someday somebody hopefully will help you when you need it. So, yeah, that's what we've heard.
I like that. We can pay it forward. So it occurs to me that every week that we do this Musar study, there's a quote in my favorite book, which you should all get, Everyday Holiness by Alan Marinis. It says that every single chapter that this is the value that all the other values stand on. So every single week, it's the same thing. So in terms of responsibilities, the rabbis want us to learn that in order to be completely human, in order to ascend in our spiritual lives, we have to both think about the consequences of our actions and think about how we can serve those around us. And since we're going to be going into Rosh Hashanah in just a couple of weeks, I would like to challenge us to think about what we can do to prepare over the next 10 days in terms of how we serve other people in our relationships, at work, and strangers that we see every day on the street. And my belief is that if we do this work over the next 10 days, we will be ready to stand in front of the Holy One and make our teshuvah and come back to the integrity that may have gotten lost somewhere on the way over the course of the year. Shabbat shalom.